This video is more of a admin video, an administrative video, than anything else. I'm going to be covering two separate topics that I think really are kind of interrelated. And that's militia unit size and unit interoperability. For interoperability, I mean different militia units working together, training together. Now, with the unit size thing, we're constantly told that we need to be small. I know that James Wesley Rawls at Survival Blog, basically considered the person in the survivalist and prepper movement, the #1 guy. He recommends that militia units and self-defense groups should be no more than 16 people, and they should be without a designated leader, that it should be leaderless resistance. Now, first off with the leader thing, you need someone in charge, otherwise no one will ever agree and nothing will ever be done. Now, you may agree on small things during peacetime, like where to train and stuff like that, but when it comes down to combat, people losing their lives, what target you should hit next type of things, it's going to be a free-for-all. It's going to be anarchy because no one's really going to want to give in. You need someone who makes that final decision and agrees to give the order. So you need to have someone that you agree, this is the final say, this is the leader of the organization. But that person must always be willing to hear other people's viewpoints and advice. I highly, highly, highly recommend that the person you choose as the leader of your militia is not chosen because of popularity, that they're chosen because of their experience, their knowledge, and their abilities. You want someone who's fairly level-headed, someone who can think clearly, especially under pressure. That's going to be kind of rare, I know that. People that usually jump out at me as #1 candidates for this would be military officers and military non-commissioned officers, or former officers and former non-commissioned officers. Otherwise, I have seen, specialists. These were lower enlisted with experience. They've worked pretty good even as militia leaders for units where there was very few veterans, if any at all. But you need to have someone that you designate as that person that's going to make that final decision. And that person really needs to work on stopping fights before they happen. Or as they're starting to crop up, those little disagreements, they clamp down on it and they end it. Ideally, it gets ended in a way that both parties or all the parties involved are okay with the final decision, but that's not always going to be the case. That's kind of the decision as a leader. And unfortunately, one of the things that will come along for this person when it comes to conflict during battle, that person has to make the decision of who's going to live and who might potentially die. When he makes the decision of this squad is going, or this team is going to do this part of the mission, and then this part is going to be doing, this section of the mission. Because you're always going to have one group that's going to be more likely to take casualties than another. Now, as for the size of your unit, keeping the unit small during peacetime makes it easier to conceal and to monitor against infiltration. Never forget about that. That law enforcement is always trying to infiltrate militias. Always. If they find out about one, they want someone on the inside. It could be one of their own people, a law enforcement officer, or it could be a paid infiltrator or informant. You always got to be on the lookout for that, and it's easier to cut down on that stuff if your unit is smaller. But during conflict, these smaller units are too small to accomplish anything of great impact against the enemy. You're going to be able to do reconnaissance, you're going to be able to do sniping, you're maybe going to be able to pull off some smaller ambushes. But even on those ambushes, the chance of you being able to wipe the enemy out so that you can take advantage of that ambush to strip the enemy dead of supplies, it's not going to happen that much. I mean, if you have only a fire team or a squad at most for the size of your unit, more than likely you're going to hit the enemy, and it's going to have to be a hit and run. You're going to ambush them, and then you're going to have to pull out before they can flank you and fix you and eliminate you. So yeah, you're going to cause the enemy casualties, but you're going to be at a net loss because you're expending ammunition that you're not going to be replacing. And the chances of being decisively engaged and not able to fight your way out increases dramatically. If your squad size unit walks into a platoon sized ambush, your entire unit will be inside the kill zone as they open fire on you. And you will have no elements on the outside that are large enough to flank the enemy to try to break the ambush. Now, larger units, they have their advantages in combat and quite a few disadvantages in peacetime. Larger units are easier to infiltrate during peacetime and harder to control and suppress conflicts before they get worse. These conflicts are easily exaggerated by infiltrators and can tear units apart. There's one particular militia unit in my state that was good size, and I got word here recently that the unit completely fell apart because of these little internal conflicts. It was conflicts of personality and conflicts of, you know, what should we do, how should we do it, things. And those little conflicts got exaggerated more than likely by infiltrators because this was a larger national unit, part of a national organization. It was not an independent militia, so it was out there. They did their Facebook thing, the websites, all that stuff. You can guarantee they were infiltrated. And the infiltrators, I highly suspect, took advantage of those little conflicts and completely tore the unit apart. Reportedly, there's some splinter elements from that larger organization now that are essentially going independent, but when that happens, you have a lot of people that don't want to get involved in a militia anymore because they say there's too much drama when that garbage happens. Now, during conflict, larger units can hurt the enemy more deeply with each attack. Plus, you can launch multiple attacks against the enemy. Now, for giving you an idea on the size here, a small unit I'm considering as platoon size and smaller. So a platoon is at least 2 squads with a minimum of 6 troops per squad. And a larger militia unit would be company size and above. And a company is made up of at least 2 platoons. So each platoon would at least be a minimum of 2 squads, preferably a max of 4 squads. So I attended a meeting here not too long ago with some other members of my unit. The unit leadership brought trusted members to this meeting to meet with representatives from other militias. And that goes into the next topic here, which is about interoperability. This meeting was a meet and greet, getting to learn the leadership and trusted members from these other units. And we were feeling each other out. You know, hey, what's your goals? And all that stuff. How do you see things? How do you plan to work in combat? That type of thing. And one thing that I took away from the meeting was there was kind of a general agreement with all these different militias who, for the most part, were independent militias. And they were brought together because of friendships between different members in the different groups. One, friend is in one militia, his buddy is in a different militia, and it came into, they set up this big meeting and stuff. Well, I'm not going to say a big meeting, but it was more than 4 people type things. Less than 100, more than 4 type situations. And one main theme that came out of it is everyone kind of agreed in order to stay in the limelight right now, or in the twilight, whatever you want to describe it, the units need to stay small. Because the larger they get, the more conflict that arises, the more attention it gets drawn to it. But they realized that should something happen, especially with some of the intel that some of us brought to this meeting, that's one of the reasons why I was brought there. There's some intel that I had. We realized that these smaller units are not going to be able to do a hell of a lot. They'll be able to do recon, do some sniping, maybe the occasional ambush, that type of thing, but they're not going to be taking out platoons. They're not going to be taking out infantry squads. They're not going to be overrunning combat outposts, and possibly not even traffic control points because they're too small. Now, something I want you to take away from this video is what really matters are your contacts with other militias in your state and area. They can more easily back you up than a unit in the same organization that is multiple states away, or even in the next state over. Because that unit is right there. They're more likely to respond to a call for help or a call for support than a militia that's multiple states away. Yes, it's good to have those contacts with militias in other states because that comes in handy during peacetime, especially during national disasters, where these units that are outside the disaster zone can bring supplies and support in to help you out. But during conflict, during war, that's not going to help you out as much. You need to have those contacts with other militias in your state, and especially in your area of your state. Your unit leadership should meet with leadership from other units, and they should learn about each other, what their stance is on different issues and things that are going on with the country, what's the core values and beliefs of each unit, what their goals are, what they want to see happen in the future, and what's their anticipated area of operations, just general. Are you operating in, say, the northern part of your state or the western part of your state? Or are you operating in the southeast corner? Are you operating in the central part of your state? Whatever type things. Or is that particular militia located around, this national park type things? And just get a general size of the unit. Is it a squad size? Is it platoon size? Is it a battalion? And the leaders need to be truthful. Okay, I do know of militias that talk about they have 60 some members or 100 members, but then you have literally at most 10 people show up to a meeting every month. So yeah, you have 60 members or 100 members on paper. You have the contact information for all those people, but how many reliably show up for training every month? And how long ago has it been since you've seen some of those other members? If you haven't seen or heard from some of those other members in more than a year, I would not consider them a member anymore. I would take them off of any membership roster that you have, put them off on the side for contact in case of emergency, contact in case of conflict is occurring, to see if they want to come back in type things. Now, if the leaders think they can work together, they should try to get the units to train alongside each other, especially during field training exercises. And this should be done as kind of a volunteer thing, especially with leaders and your core members, the members that show up reliably to each meeting. You know, your organization has a field exercise on this month, so that other unit sends over, 6 people, 4 people, or even just 2 people to observe and participate in a training, get an idea of how you work and that stuff. And then when they have their next field exercise, you do the same thing. You send over a few people over to train with them, to see how they train, see how they think, see how they fight, how they set everything up. And the leaders should then set up emergency means of contact for during conflicts and emergencies. Because you're probably not going to be able to use cell phones. You might not be able to use radios depending on what the emergency is. So you have to have other means of contact, especially during conflict. A good way to think of this is your monitored drop points. You have an area where you can drop off a message, a coded message. That area is checked regularly or is kept under watch by that unit or the militia auxiliary for that unit. When they notice the message is there, they turn it over to the leadership checks it out, and okay, the Greenbrier militia wants to meet with the Brown Water militia in 2 weeks on this day at this location at this time, because they need to discuss about a future operation, or they need help with a particular enemy unit that's moved into the area, something along those lines. So that covers all the notes that I had written down for this. So there are people in the militia unit that are working right now, or in the militia movement that are working right now to get in each individual state to get the different militias to work together. And I highly commend them for doing it, because they're thinking ahead. That's one of the things that brought up this idea for the video for me. And I recently left the 3% security force, and I know over there's people that talked about they're trying to get their unit to work with militias in other organizations and that stuff, and they would be told, hey, yeah, that's a great idea, go ahead, do that, we should be doing that. And then a couple days later, that member was getting kicked out for misconduct and whatever type of BS reason that was made up by their leadership. And they were getting kicked out because they were talking to another militia. And I think it had to do because they were worried about the intel that member would learn from that other militia. Intel about certain people inside the leadership of the 3% security force. So there's a lot of questionable stuff that happens in that organization. So very, very questionable. And that's one of the reasons why I left. So now, for all my engineer brothers and the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, essayons.